My name is Marcel. I'm 104 years old. I'm presenting the Esperanto show on radio station 3ZZZ. I never heard of Esperanto, but my grandfather had. Esperanto was taught in a radio program. He went to all his children and all his grandchildren and told them, not asked them, he told them, you have to start learning Esperanto on the radio. We lived in Amsterdam, very close to the center of the city, which is beautiful. 4 canals that have been dug around the center. From there I could see the famous Westertoren, which is a church. My father was an artist, but not so much in painting, but in wood carving. My mother didn't work because women didn't work in those days. I took my bicycle and went and followed more or less the Tour de France, but not in the high mountains, of course. And for 5 months I did that. Halfway I met a girlfriend who became betrothed to me. Violette was her name. But lived in France, and I lived in Amsterdam in Holland, being a Dutchman. We just wrote letters to each other. At the end of the war, she was influenced by an old woman, and that often happens in France. The old women in France, they feel that they have to make everybody practicing Christian. So she was worked on to become a churchgoer, a believer. And so she wrote me that she had become a Christian. And then I said, well, in that case, I break off relations with you because you either have to love Jesus or me. When I was a young boy, I was a communist because it was against capitalism. But then later I changed my ideas and thought communism is too dictatorial. As it is in the communist countries. And then I thought, no, it is better to have, to live in anarchist society where everybody is free to do what he likes. Later, after that, I got hooked by the ideas of Karl Marx. He was called a communist, and he was, but he was not a communist as the party communists are. The party communists are dictatorial. The party, you all have to obey the party. On the other hand, the Karl Marx communism was society or living together should depend on people discussing things and deciding things together in meetings. And so I became an adept, and still am, of that political ideal. Well, the Germans, they first bombarded the whole inner city of Rotterdam. Very cruel, but then Rotterdam was not a very beautiful city. The German said, the next town we are going to obliterate will be Utrecht, and the day after that we will obliterate the center of Amsterdam, which is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. So the Dutch government didn't want that. They fled to England and said, well, we won't fight anymore after 5 days of fighting. So they let the Germans in, and the Germans occupied Holland, and then we lived according to their rules. And of course, one of the rules was that young people, unmarried women, and married or not men, these people had to work in Germany, in factories, in other places. Most people thought it better to hide, and I too. And so we just kept hiding during the whole war, behind walls or underground or wherever you could hide. But they found lots of us. And then the Jews, they especially were after the Jews. And the communists, they had killed them all already. The wealthy Dutch farmers, they sold their food, plenty of food, but they wanted gold and silver for it. But the poor, to get reasonably priced food from farmers, you had to go to the poor farmers, because they were helpful and they didn't charge that much. And so, I couldn't do that because I couldn't be on the road. The Germans would have stopped me and then sent me away. So the women had to do that, or my old father had to go on their bicycles to where the poor farmers lived. And my wife, when she was only a few weeks expecting a baby, she still went on her bicycle to get food to eat. My wife became my wife, not out of love, but it was a forced marriage. It was at the end of the war. My wife was one of those girls that had made friends with German soldiers, and these people were going to be heavily punished after the war by the Dutch underground. And for her, it would be good to get married and have a child quickly, so that they wouldn't punish her in public. And I hadn't been able to find a woman, a wife, for all those years, partly because I wasn't sexually capable, and so my sister made sure that I got in contact with my wife to marry, and just to marry for necessity for both. And that was not so difficult to get to know each other, because both of us were studying self-defense in a township there. We of course married, and we straight away had a child. I didn't want a child actually, but she did, to hold off the Dutch underground. At one stage we had sex, and I must say, after not having been able to sex in the past, I could have sex with her. And so I had sex on in the bush, in the bushes close by, where we lived, and she just said that she couldn't be pregnant because it was a certain time of her how you call it. That is why I got the first child, because my wife lied about it. The first year, perhaps, or half a year, we had good relations, plenty of sex, and it was still war. It was still war then, and didn't love each other, but loved the sex. Then, once the child came, a boy, we became closer, but I made advances to another girl that I had loved before, a friend of us. That was very bad for her to take. But there was another friend there who the next day went to her house at 11 o'clock and had sex with her then, after having convinced that I was no good. And obviously I was no good because I had tried to advance with the other girl. And so he had sex there at 11 o'clock every day for 4 or 5 years with her without me knowing it. So she had plenty of sex and I didn't. Yes, I did. I had sex with her, but she later told me, told me that she never had any how you call it, sexual feelings for me, and just let me have my sex with her. And so we lived in different worlds. All the same, for 75 years, I stayed with her as her husband, and she as my wife. We just found it better, but she had boyfriends and sometimes even girlfriends for the 70 years that we were married, and that our children grew up. Right till the end, but long before she died, though, I already had my own girlfriends. No, we didn't have a good marriage, but we had a good life often, and we enjoyed traveling together. We traveled together and had fun together. When the children were born, they were very happy days. When I see my grandchildren, great-grandchildren now, they're very happy days. We had a fulfilling life in that respect too, with our offspring. And we thought at that time in Holland and in Europe that there would be another world war very soon between Russia and the rest of Europe. And we didn't want our children to have to suffer that, so that was another reason to go to Australia. When we were a few kilometers outside Australia still, we couldn't see it yet. The ship was still too far away, but we were closing in, and we could nearly see it, but not yet. But we could smell Australia. The wind came from the coast, and Australia smelled all the flowers growing there. All that smell came to the ship, and we could smell Australia before we saw it. Well, when we arrived, I went just looking for jobs all over the place, and did quite a few different jobs. I've been working in a factory where they put, at that time, when they filled in large bags with wool to be sent overseas, that wool had to be stamped in. You know, the idiots nowadays, they say, oh, all those people that don't work, they don't want to work, they are lazy. That's not true, because at that time there was plenty of work, and everybody wanted to work. Nobody was lazy then, and the people haven't changed. At the end of the year, we traveled and moved with our furniture to Hobart to live in a house belonging to the school where I was going to teach. I am not a born teacher. I'm not very interested in teaching. I manage all right, but I'm not that interested, and I'm not interested enough in my pupils either. I'm interested in the scientific side of languages. When we came to Melbourne, we thought life, everything was 50 years behind Europe. When we came to Hobart, we thought Hobart is 50 years behind Melbourne. It was very old-fashioned, everything. In the controversy between China and the United States, which will be the main war, America has always managed to not have the war on its soil. So what they have done in this case is Japan and Australia will be the places from where they, the United States, from where they will attack China, with the result that the Chinese will concentrate on annihilating Japan and Australia. And that's all because we have a stupid system of being a colony of the United States. We are not independent. We should be independent. And then besides that, we have a head of state who can decide whether to have a war or not. And then we have China, who wants to punish us too for helping America. And that's why I think, especially Australia and Japan, will have a hard life, and I wouldn't suggest having children. My name is Marcel, after the painter Marcel in the opera Bohème of Puccini. My parents loved operas, and I do too. I've seen hundreds of operas. I have tapes of music and mainly singing in operas, covering 2,000 hours of music.